are we as far along as Satoshi Nakamoto thought we would be at this point?
Bitcoin is kind of a binary outcome. Either it works tremendously well, or it probably doesn't work very much at all. It eventually stagnates and dies. But I do think in 7 years, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do think Bitcoin could be another 10x here in terms of market capitalization, transaction volumes, overall adoption. I don't think another order of magnitude would be off the table in that time frame, and I think that'd be considered very successful for that time frame.
Today, we have an exciting update for you. We recently caught up with renowned analyst Lyn Alden, who shared some fascinating insights about the future of Bitcoin and the global monetary landscape. Stay tuned as we break down her predictions and what they mean for the crypto world. But before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash the like button to show your support. Now, let's get started.
The way that markets work in terms of money, especially on the global scale, is that, over time, people want to get out of weaker monies as they can. And if there's all this kind of fencing that kind of keeps them in, but technology is a way to kind of break through that. And so it's when we see kind of these countries fail, like these currencies fail, they generally don't return to the gold standard. They if anything, they dollarize. Mm-hmm. That's usually their go-to. And so we generally see that as developing countries have currency problems, the developing currencies kind of get inroads in there. And the big question is what happens when eventually these major developed currencies fail or begin to have their kind of ongoing inflationary spiral in a similar way you see in emerging markets. So basically when their debt levels get so high, when their interest expense is completely untenable, when we have a energy shortage, for example, and you see kind of just money printing from these central banks, what happens then? What is the apex predator asset that comes after them? In a similar way that the dollar comes after Argentina, comes after Lebanon, what comes after these major currencies when they eventually start to have problems? And really the only two options, I think, are gold or Bitcoin. In a world where Bitcoin was never invented, gold would be the only possible fallback mechanism to recapitalize the system, reset, and unfortunately probably build the whole system again. You probably would fractional reserve gold again and kind of repeat this cycle over another century. I don't know. Bitcoin presents another path we can take, and the question becomes, will Bitcoin remain secure and decentralized enough to kind of hold that burden? It's scarcer than gold in the sense that as lower terminal supply, so eventually zero inflation, compared to gold's on average 1.5% inflation per year. Bitcoin is also portable, so you can bring it around the world with you. You can memorize 12 words, and you can bring all of your Bitcoin with you. Whereas if you try to bring dollars or gold through an airport, you're going to be pretty restricted in how much you can legally bring through and practically bring through. And so that portability and that extra scarceness gives it a really powerful advantage. But of course, it is reliant on the global telecommunication system. It is reliant on being able to survive against potential attacks or bugs. And so it's, we're still less than 15 years into Bitcoin's existence. And I think every kind of cycle it goes through is another test to see how resilient it is. And to the extent that if Bitcoin does not break, if Bitcoin cannot be captured or defeated in some way, I would expect it to continue capturing market share. And then should whatever reason it fail, gold is still a fallback option. It's something that, the power goes out and you have gold, you still have your own bearer asset money. So I still think gold has a role even in a Bitcoin future. And the main question between gold or Bitcoin comes down to, can someone figure out, can nation states break Bitcoin? Can someone try to find a way to break Bitcoin? Will Bitcoin ever fall from its own incentive structure? Like will it ever kind of centralize in a way that damages it? And if not, I think it continues taking market share. In a world where Bitcoin is successful, large institutions are going to own chunks of it. That's eventually even central banks would own significant.
We have a Bitcoin standard.
Exactly, and so over time, I think it's one of those things. If any one entity were to own, say, 20% of Bitcoin, I'd find that very concerning because if there were kind of attempts at forks and things like that, they'd have a lot of pricing power to help determine which fork can win. But if an entity has a few percentage of the Bitcoin network, I don't view that as an attack on Bitcoin. And in general, an asset that is, the scarcer an asset is and the faster it can be withdrawn, the harder it is to build large paper markets over it, right? So one of the challenges with gold is that as scarce and attractive as it is, the portability is limiting, the divisibility, the verification is limiting. And so historically what happens is people want to hold their gold in vaults, and then it gets fraction reserved and rehypothecated. And that eventually breaks after decades. Eventually entities like China or India just kind of keep taking the gold and keep taking the gold, and eventually things break.
Yeah.
But that's like usually a multi-decade process. Whereas if you have something like Bitcoin that can be withdrawn quicker, every 10 minutes on average, the entire network is audited by the node network. You can bring Bitcoin out. It grows more slowly. It has zero terminal inflation. That shrugs off attempts at rehypothecation and fractional reserve more quickly. The cycle's years instead of decades. Bitcoin is kind of a binary outcome. Either it works tremendously well, or it probably doesn't work very much at all. It eventually stagnates and dies. And so basically saying 20 years from now, does something kill it? Does nobody want to use it? Do people find something better? If so, then you're not going to have almost any volume, perhaps no volume. On the other hand, if Bitcoin continues to be successful, the volumes could be tremendous, and the Bitcoin will be prospering in that regard. So at the 14-year mark into that, 14 years since Bitcoin's inception, 13 years since he said that, the Bitcoin network does process trillions of dollars worth of Bitcoin transaction volume. Now, a lot of that is moving between exchanges. A lot of that is people choosing to pull that into their own cold storage. Basically, you still have a lot of overall volume. It's not really yet for medium exchange purposes, but I think that's normal in this kind of early period of adoption where the price keeps going up, where there's capital gains taxes on any sale you might have. People have a natural tendency to hoard it and use it as that savings. But I think the fact that, if you were to go back to 2010 and say, this network's worth $500 billion, the current temporary Speaker of the House hosts the Bitcoin white paper on his website. He's actually a Bitcoin fan. Mm-hmm. We've had multiple presidential candidates talk about Bitcoin. Yeah. We have a nation that has adopted it as its second legal tender along with the dollar. Right. And they have their own Bitcoin office. You have, the Kingdom of Bhutan was mining Bitcoin. We have some of the Middle Eastern countries getting into Bitcoin mining. We have trillions of dollars in transaction volume. Now, so I do think that we're actually quite far along in that whole vision. And when I picture 7 years from now, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do expect we'll be further along. But when you kind of compare where the Bitcoin network is now, where it can go, or what the competition is, when we look at FedWire, so the Federal Reserve's base settlement system, that settles, and this is not a typo, $1 quadrillion of settlement volumes per year. It was 1.06 quadrillion. That's 1,000 trillions in gross settlement volume. So these numbers can reach extraordinarily high levels. Basically what Bitcoin is a decentralized open source FedWire for the world. And so right now it's still tiny compared to the biggest ledger, which is the dollar system, the FedWire system, the euro dollar system built around that system. That's by far the biggest network. Bitcoin is nowhere near getting to that. And I think even in 7 years, it'll still be probably not in the same ballpark as the dollar system. But I do think in 7 years, so Satoshi's 20-year mark, I do think Bitcoin could be another 10x here in terms of market capitalization, transaction volumes, overall adoption. I don't think another order of magnitude would be off the table in that time frame, and I think that'd be considered very successful for that time frame.
Lyn Alden's insights paint a compelling picture of Bitcoin's future. As the world moves closer to the end of the current debt-based monetary system, Bitcoin stands as a beacon of hope, offering a decentralized and secure alternative. If you found this information valuable, don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as excited about Bitcoin's future as we are, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and make sure to subscribe for more updates.